This is video 2 of this deck build, and it's all about the framing. The next video, you paying attention, will be tomorrow, and that will be all about the decking and the hidden fasteners. This one's all about framing. I did somehow leave out how I made the beams together. Those are glued. First they're glued, nailed, and then screwed. That's just how I do it. In this particular deck build, that double beam isn't really necessary. I'll draw a diagram of why I normally use a double beam. But first I want to start out with this picture here. Okay, this is the ground. This is your hole that you dig, and it's always going to have a little arc at the sides. Now your form tube, that sono tube doesn't go all the way down to the bottom. It's called concrete form tube. So that just sticks up, maybe 6 to 8 inches below the ground. And a lot of times you can jam like a rock or a stick in there just to hold it firm, and then you just level it with your level, on the top, or maybe a little one on the side. Now I have seen way a long time ago wood posts, 4x4 posts buried into the concrete, just like you would a mailbox or a fence. But that's not how you're supposed to do it. You use a metal post base. If you go to the aisle in Home Depot where they have all their Simpson hangers, you'll find post bases for 4x4s and 6x6s. I never ever use a 4x4 post to build a deck. The deck that you're watching now, it doesn't have posts. It's as low to the ground as possible, but I still use a post base. The depth, I've worked for deck builders. That's what I did in college. And you go as deep as you can. There's the letter of the it's not the law. It's a rule. You're supposed to go down to below frost line. So if your frost line is 40 inches deep, you want to go deeper than that. The reason behind that is in the northern climates, when things freeze and thaw, this can get heaved up out of the ground. I've personally never seen anything major, like major heaving, like where it goes up 10 inches or anything like that. Well, that's what you're supposed to do. Most deck builders just go as deep as they can. What else? Permits came up quite a bit as a question. I live in a very free state where there is very low regulation both in your economic freedoms and your personal freedoms. So if you live in New York, that's where I've built the most decks, is in the state of New York, where there is a ton of regulation. You might have to get a permit to buy a box of screws, as someone pointed out in a comment on one of the other videos. If it's not attached to an actual residence, you don't need a permit. Now, residence being a habitable house, if you make it freestanding and below a certain height, you don't need a permit. And most people just don't pull permits anyways. My history with deck building. In college is when I got the most condensed, education in it. Not in a classroom. Or in the summer times, I worked for a huge builder on the East Coast. And one of their small projects was tearing down and rebuilding decks on apartment buildings. And they started at the second floor. The first floor just was a slab of concrete, sliding glass doors come out. Then there was a second floor deck and a third floor deck. The apartment building was from the 70s and everything was rotting. Being in the East Coast, that's just how things go. So my job was to tear them down and rebuild brand new decks. The new decks were wood framed, non-treated, because of all the flashing and the wrapping. It was kind of a unique deck build, but it was not treated wood. Everything was sleeved in vinyl. The deck boards were vinyl, and the deck boards were actually screwed down to plywood that had ice and water shield over the top of it. Kind of getting off on a tangent, but that's what I did every day, all day, was tear down decks and rebuild decks. And I got pretty good at it. And then I would go back in wintertime and build new decks, second and third story decks on new apartment buildings. And that's when I learned that you do not want to work by the hour. And I went to him, I said, I won't work by the hour anymore. I want a fixed price for a complete turnkey done, tore down and rebuilt second and third story deck. Is this working for, I mean, this was a long time ago. I was like $15 an hour, and I was like, this ain't worth it. I can build these decks twice as fast as these drunk bums that you got working on the next building. And he said, okay, came up with a number. Since I was in school to be a construction manager, I came with like this really strict schedule, critical path schedule, just for a deck. And man, I was busting these decks out in, I'd have the entire deck tore down in half a day, and mostly framed by middle of the next day. I mean, it was 3 days, and I was tearing decks down and building second and third story decks. My biggest holdup was getting enough material from the builder. Okay, here's a diagram of a raised deck, so you don't want it low to the ground. This would be your 6x6 post. This would be your caisson. This is your post base. And at the top here, this is how I always do it. And like I said, I use 6x6s. I notch out the post and rest the beam inset into that notch, and then bolt it to the post. Maybe in the future I'll build a deck, or I also do my covered patios like this. So I have my posts and my big beams, and then your roof rafters would come down and rest right on your beam there. Okay, 12 footers are in, and I got 4 16 footers, and I can't wait to set them on top of these caissons here and put a level on it and see if that laser that I had there did its job. Two more. Okay, got you up close. This is the middle caisson pillar. Man, these suckers are wet and heavy. Looks good so far. Look at that. Okay, well, they're all touching. No bouncy or sagging. Make sure everything is clear. You guys gotta see this. This is awesome. Awesome. Real time. I didn't do this beforehand to make sure that it was gonna be that perfect. That is dead level over 16 feet. Okay. How's my hair look? Okay. As of right now, all the framings delivered, all the hangers and brackets and bases are here. Still deciding on color of the deck boards. I brought 4 samples over, and he's deciding on them by tomorrow afternoon. Just laid out all the joists on 16 inches on center. Starting on this side, we'll have less than 16 inches between the last joist and the outside rim joist there. These ones are cut, and this one is cut. Run out of room to stack these, so I'm gonna start tacking them in. That's something else I do a little bit different, is I'll tack these in so that they are perfectly flush, the top edge of the joist and the top edge of the beam here. Either I'll toenail them or shoot them in like through the top there, and then I will come back and put my hangers on underneath and attach those with my palm nailer. Oh, my batteries run a little low, but I am going to be installing all the joist hangers. Now they're all laid out, and so place your bets. How long is it going to take me to install all the joist hangers? There's two different size nails, 1.5s and 2.5s. It's currently 7:42 p.m. I think it's going to take me 30 minutes. I'm shooting for 30 minutes to have all the hangers on. Okay, reset the timer. I had to go get a new battery. It's 7:44 p.m. Age 15. What is that? 31 minutes? And even having to go flip the breaker back on. So I'm going to put blocking in the middle. Being so low to the ground, it really doesn't matter, but I don't know what type of crazy dance parties they're going to have out there hidden behind the garage. So I want to make sure it's done extra sturdy. That's all for now. So today is the start of day 4. Keep in mind, on day 2, I didn't do any work. All I did was purchase and deliver the framing to this area. So I have 6 hours on Monday. We'll call it 2 hours on Tuesday. Yesterday was Wednesday. That's the day that I got held up at Home Depot and worked about 11 hours total. And today I think it will be 4 hours is what I'm guesstimating. You can do the math and figure out what the total time to build this is. And what do we have here? This is an antique relic that I take with me to work. That is what I keep in my workshop, but I brought it with me today. There is a major difference between these two, and I'm not going to try to tell you that this is just as good as this, because this it's adequate for most jobs, but this here is just super. So when I install all these deck boards, they're going to be left long on that side, and I will put a straight edge down and cut off the excess with this saw. Mainly because it does have the high tooth count blade on this particular saw. It spins faster, it's got more torque, it will zip through this composite decking and create a laser cut line. I'm going to put my blocking in, and that blocking, although not really necessary, it is how you're supposed to build a deck. Right now it's rock solid, but if you get a lot of people up here, you know, you never know what these customers are going to do. They could have they could be out here square dancing or something, and they get bouncing up and down on this thing. Well, these boards here, these joists, with the bounce and the stomping and all that, can start to bend out. They can go down and flex, or either way. So what the bracing does is just make it so that there is no give. There's no way for this to flex out. So that's on today's list. What else is on today's list? Make sure it's square. Even though I did square it up yesterday, you take measurements diagonally from corner to corner in a crisscross pattern, and you just kind of kick it until those measurements are exactly the same. And now when they're the exact same, I will install these post bases here, get those fastened into the concrete and then fastened to the beam. One of the last steps will be me setting this inside and making those, you know, making one beam out of two pieces of wood. That's what we're doing today. Now I'm going to use this one here, and let's see what it says. It's got a full battery. Keep in mind, this is a high tooth count. I don't know, maybe 40 tooth count. So it's not meant for cutting through lumber like this, the blade. But let's just see what the difference is. Whew. Didn't even really slow down at all. There you go. I'm going to cut blocks, lay them all out, and then I'll be nailing them in. They'll be a little bit staggered so that I can get the nail gun in each bay here. Goal is to meet the customer at 6 p.m. tonight and help them move all their barbecue and their furniture out here. Well, I'm going to keep going because there are a lot of times there are these strange unknowns that just pop up out of nowhere and can really slow you down, and you don't predict it at all. So I'm not going to get lazy or anything, and just keep chugging along. First diagonal was 233 1/4. This one is 233 1/2. So it's a 1/4 inch out of square. So I'm going to give this a kick this way 1/8 of an inch. A 1/8 inch boot. That's it. I'm all set to put the first row in, and this is what a starter strip looks like, or starter fastener. I didn't tell you about my Home Depot experience getting these deck boards that were kind of sprung on me. The morning that I was supposed to go pick up different deck boards at a different Home Depot, I got a text from the customer that says that they changed their mind and bought different deck boards from a different Home Depot, and it was a fiasco. So I got a little bit behind on my schedule, so I had to turn the camera off a little bit more during the framing. But if you got questions, leave them in the comment section below. Oh, and thanks for everybody who signed up on Instagram.